Have you ever wondered if history is accurate? You know, all those dates we memorize, names of battles, wars, and treaties, people's accomplishments and downfalls. Are they true or are they lies? And I don't mean little white lies like how Santa Claus came down the chimney and ate all the cookies because we were good children. I mean major historical events that we have been taught for generations. Could it be that everything we know is wrong? Well, there is evidence that some parts of our history are not accurate. And some historians say that maybe we should stop teaching them in schools. I mean, it would be a shame if we were learning things that never happened. So keep watching to find out what some of these crazy theories are. No. 10. The pharaohs weren't buried with their treasure. In the Valley of the Kings near Luxor in Egypt, archaeologists have found several tombs of pharaohs. The most famous one belonged to King Tutankhamun, who was only 9 years old when he became pharaoh. He ruled for 10 years, but died at age 19. His tomb was discovered in November of 1922 by Howard Carter. It was the first intact pharaoh's tomb ever found. Previous tombs had either been robbed or destroyed, but young King Tut's tomb was full of treasure. Well, almost full. There are several artifacts missing from his tomb, including his golden chariot and whip, a large statue of the king, and even a model boat which would have accompanied him into the afterlife. Of course, grave robbers had taken many things throughout history, so nothing really unusual here, right? Well, there are a few reasons why this theory started floating around. One reason is that the items that were stolen seem to be the most valuable ones. Another reason is that back in 1923, a British official named Ali Mohammed Said declared that he had seen a secret stash of treasures from the tomb being moved onto a train in the middle of the night. He said that the artifacts were being smuggled out of the country for Lord Carnarvon, the man who funded the dig. There is no evidence to support Mohammed's claim, and it sounds far-fetched. However, given the timing of the disappearances, it seems possible that someone wanted to steal the most precious objects without leaving any traces. Number 9. Julius Caesar wasn't stabbed. This is another widely accepted fact of history that some historians challenge. Did Julius Caesar really get stabbed to death by members of the Roman Senate on March 44 BC? He certainly did in movies, in Shakespeare plays and school books. But some scholars question this. According to Suetonius, one of Caesar's assassins, Tullius Cimber approached him on that fateful day and asked him to spare his brother Gaius, who had been exiled by Caesar. When Caesar refused, Cimber grabbed his dagger and plunged it into the dictator's chest. Then about 60 senators jumped in, and together they dealt Caesar at least 23 stab wounds. But according to historian Mary Beard, professor of classics at the University of Cambridge, the stabbing might not have happened like that at all. She says that based on recent research, Caesar was most likely killed by a single blow to the chest. Basically, a Tusker punch. Beard also thinks that it might have been a planned assassination rather than an impulsive attack. Furthermore, Plutarch wrote that after the attacks, blood ran down Caesar's right shoulder, meaning that he was probably stabbed from the left side, not stabbed in the chest from the front. And modern scholars think that it was a sword thrust, not a dagger stab. Lastly, the number of assassins might have been higher than 60, since they couldn't all fit in Caesar's room. All in all, the assassination needs a lot more investigation, and perhaps someday we will discover the truth about what really happened to Julius Caesar. Number 8. Jesus wasn't born in Bethlehem. You probably learned in Sunday school that Jesus was born in Bethlehem, where his mother Mary and his father Joseph went for the census. The story goes that while they were there, Mary gave birth to Jesus in a stable. The exact location of this event is now known as the Church of the Nativity. However, some historians say that the Bible itself contradicts this story. The census that Joseph and Mary had to attend took place in the city of David, which was most likely Jerusalem. And the Gospel of Matthew says that wise men came from the east to see Jesus. This doesn't sound like something that could have happened in a small town in Judea. Also, the story of Jesus' birth appears in the Gospel of Luke, which was written by a man named Luke, a former doctor. Scholars say that Luke's stories are more fantastical than those of other evangelists, making them less reliable. For example, he also wrote that 2,000 pairs of oxen and 1,000 sheep were offered as sacrifices when Jesus was born. Historians say that there weren't that many animals in all of Judea. They estimate that Luke got his numbers from a pagan source, which means that the whole thing about Jesus' birth may have been fabricated. 7 Vikings didn't wear horns. This is another widely held belief that has no basis in reality. Even though helmets with horns are often depicted in paintings and movies, there is no archaeological evidence that such helmets ever existed. The first time horned Viking helmets appeared was in the 1800s. An artist named Richard Wagner used them as symbols of Nordic barbarism. Then a Danish author named Alexandre Dumas created a fictional character called the Viking Gorm the Old, who wore a horned helmet and wielded a huge axe. After that, horned helmets became part of the Viking costume. However, they seem to have nothing to do with the real Viking culture. Archaeological findings show that Vikings used practical helmets made of leather or metal, but none of them had horns. It would have been very easy to spot such details, because over 8,000 Viking helmets have been excavated in Denmark alone, yet none of them had horns. Fun fact, ancient Germanic people didn't even wear helmets with their everyday clothes, only when they went into battle. Number 6. Al Capone didn't really kill Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States, was shot by John Wilkes Booth in 1865. He died the next morning. At the time, people thought that Booth had acted alone, but recently a researcher at the University of Virginia presented new evidence that showed that Lincoln might have been the victim of a conspiracy. Booth was a famous actor and Confederate sympathizer. He believed that by killing Lincoln, he would save the South. But he was not involved in organized crime. That's why the conspiracy theory exists. David C. King argues that although Booth shot Lincoln, the conspiracy was actually orchestrated by the Italian-American mafia boss, Albert Anastasia. Anastasia was a member of the powerful Bonanno crime family. He was rumored to be a suspect in several high-profile murders, but he was never charged. In 2014, researchers at the University of Virginia conducted a forensic analysis of documents related to Lincoln's murder. They examined a letter that Booth wrote to a friend before his death, and a confession that he allegedly wrote on the floor of a barn where he was hiding. The scientists used a scanning electron microscope to find traces of ink on the documents, which helped them determine whether the letter and the confession were written at the same time. Since Anastasia lived in Italy at the time, it would have been impossible for him to be involved, right? Well, the scientists found that the confession was written 10 days before the letter. This means that Booth could have written the confession under Anastasia's orders. However, this theory is still debated. Number 5. Queen Elizabeth I wasn't a virgin. Most people are familiar with the legend that Queen Elizabeth I of England never had sex. This story comes from her funeral sermon, in which the Bishop of London said that the Queen had remained a virgin for the sake of her kingdom. But the truth may be quite different. Recent research suggests that Elizabeth may have had a series of lovers, including Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, whom she appointed to several important positions. The two seem to have a very close relationship. And there are letters showing that the Queen was madly in love. Some historians say that Elizabeth kept her relationship with Dudley a secret to protect her power and independence. The myth that she was a virgin cemented after her death. Elizabeth's advisors realized that a queen who had sexual urges could easily be blackmailed, so they invented the myth to protect the throne. Number 4. Jesus wasn't crucified. Once again, the story of Jesus Christ raises a lot of questions. A lot of people believe that he was crucified, but some historians doubt it. According to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Jesus was arrested, tried, and sentenced to death. He was then scourged, put up on a cross, and nailed to it with spikes. But scholars point out that the Gospels contain several anachronisms, meaning that they describe things that were out of place. For example, they say that Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea, ordered Jesus to be crucified. In fact, vinegar was a common drink at the time, and it wouldn't make sense for them to waste it on a criminal.